Counterproductive tariffs on European EVs. Why Chinese automakers are secretly smiling. On November 1, 2025, local time, the European Union's punitive tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles officially took effect. This trade measure, which followed a 15-month anti-dumping and anti-subsidy investigation and imposed a maximum tariff rate of 45.3%, finally transformed from an EU Commission document into a real-world trade barrier. At the policy announcement in Brussels, EU Trade Commissioner Valdis Dombrovskis still championed it as a necessary measure to defend the European automotive industrial ecosystem and maintain fair competition. However, the signals coming from the European market in the first week after the policy's implementation run contrary to this original intention. From public criticism by German auto executives at the Munich Motor Show to trade risk warnings issued by the Hungarian government, from consumer complaints about price hikes at Parisian dealerships to the prominent local production plans announced on Chinese automakers' European websites, this highly anticipated industrial defense war by the EU has, from the start, exhibited an escalating, uncontrollable backlash. Germany's big three automakers have collectively submitted a letter of protest to the European Commission. Countries like Hungary have openly stated that the policy harms national interests. European consumers are facing a jump in car purchase costs. Meanwhile, Chinese automakers like BYD and Nio have already constructed a tariff firewall through prearranged local manufacturing facilities, exhibiting unexpected composure and confidence in this sudden trade spat. Key contradiction: German automakers, betrayal, and the EU's internal rifts. The most immediate resistance to the tariff policy comes from the core of the European automotive industry, Germany. The big three, Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes-Benz, have all expressed opposition, calling it a short-sighted act of protectionism. Data from the German Association of the Automotive Industry, VDA, shows that German automakers' joint ventures in China contribute over 30% of their global revenue, and the Chinese EV component supply system is deeply integrated into their global industrial chains. The CEO of the Volkswagen Group explicitly stated that imposing tariffs would increase the cost of EV manufacturing in Europe by 12%, and its battery production lines, which rely on Chinese technology, face the risk of a supply cutoff. Germany's opposition is not an isolated case. The rift this tariff controversy has opened up within the EU is deeper than anticipated. Notably, Hungary, the current rotating president of the EU Council, has actively taken the lead in opposing the policy. Its stance is the most conspicuous, dissenting voice within the EU due to the strength of its opposition and the frequency of its statements. For Hungary, this opposition is not just a political declaration but an inevitable choice based on its economic development strategy. The automotive industry is one of the country's pillar industries, accounting for 14% of its GDP. Attracting foreign automakers to establish operations and building a Central and Eastern European automotive manufacturing hub is its core development path, and Chinese automakers are key targets for its investment promotion efforts. Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó publicly slammed the policy at the EU Foreign Affairs Council, saying, "The European Commission has hijacked member states' right to develop with trade protectionism. This decision, which puts the interests of a single industry above the economic interests of all of Europe, is leading Europe into a trade war it is bound to lose." He even stated that Brussels bureaucrats have no right to decide for Hungarians whether to give up thousands of jobs. Nagy Adam, Deputy State Secretary of Hungary's Ministry for Economic Development, further disclosed the specific impact of the tariff policy. BYD not only planned a battery factory in Hungary with a total investment of €750 million but was also simultaneously negotiating an EV assembly line project. The two plans combined would create over 2,000 direct jobs and are expected to generate nearly 10,000 job opportunities for local companies. These investments are key levers for Hungary to deal with the energy crisis and achieve economic transformation. The tariff policy forces BYD to reevaluate investment risks, and the project team has currently suspended the submission of subsequent approval documents, Nagy Adam stated, revealing Hungary's anxiety. In fact, Hungary's position is not isolated. Central and Eastern European countries like Bulgaria and Romania have also explicitly stood in the opposition camp, as these nations all hope to leverage investment from Chinese automakers to improve their local manufacturing systems. According to internal, unreleased EU voting records, in addition to the 5 countries, including Hungary and Bulgaria, that explicitly voted against the tariffs, 12 countries, including Italy and Spain, abstained. The countries supporting the tariffs were mainly concentrated in Western European nations with relatively strong domestic auto industries, such as France and Belgium. The so-called consensus to protect European industry was, from the start, merely the demand of a few countries and never truly formed among the 27 EU members. Chinese automakers. First mover advantage. Localized strategy mitigates tariff impact. Before the EU tariffs took effect, Chinese automakers had already mitigated risk through a bypass, localized strategy. BYD's actions have been the swiftest. Its factory in Hungary is already in the equipment installation phase and is expected to start production in 2026, with an annual capacity of 150,000 vehicles. EVs produced there will directly enjoy EU domestic manufacturing status and be completely exempt from import tariffs. New forces like Nio and Xpeng are also accelerating their European factory plans. Nio's Berlin R&D center is operational, and its ET5T model for the European market will gradually achieve local production. For models that still need to be imported, Chinese automakers' pricing strategies also show flexibility. Data shows that the BYD Seal is priced at approximately €38,000 in the EU. Although the price has increased by 5% due to tariffs, its technological advantage in blade batteries and a 5-year warranty service still make it 8% cheaper than the equivalent Volkswagen ID.3. More critically, Chinese automakers control 70% of the world's power battery capacity, and European domestic automakers' EV production costs are 40% higher than China's. This industrial chain advantage means the price difference caused by the tariffs is significantly diluted. The cost to the public and the shadow of retaliation, a protection war, paid for by European consumers. The biggest victims of the tariffs are emerging European consumers. Internal estimates by the European Commission show that after the tariffs take effect, the average price of imported Chinese EVs will increase by €12,000 to €18,000. And domestic automakers are already taking the opportunity to raise their own prices. Tesla has already hiked the price of the Model 3 in the European market by 5%, and the entry-level price of the Volkswagen ID.4 has also risen to €39,000, an increase of €6,000. Polish economist Witold Orlowski points out that against the backdrop of unalleviated inflation in Europe, rising EV prices will directly lead to a decline in consumer purchasing interest, with the expected growth rate of EV sales in the EU projected to fall from 18% to 12% in 2025. More serious is the risk of escalating trade friction. China's Ministry of Commerce has explicitly stated that it does not accept the EU's tariff measures and has launched anti-dumping and anti-subsidy double anti investigations into European pork, dairy products, and luxury cars. Data shows that China is the EU's largest export market for pork, with export value reaching €12 billion in 2024. Furthermore, annual sales of German luxury cars in China account for 45% of their global sales. If China adopts equivalent countermeasures, the losses incurred by BMW and Mercedes-Benz will far exceed the protective benefits brought by the tariffs. The French cognac industry has also issued a warning. China is its second largest export market, and inclusion on the retaliation list would result in annual losses of €800 million for the industry. The dilemma, a fatal conflict between green transition and industrial protection. The fundamental contradiction of the EU's tariff policy lies in the severe divergence between its green transition goals and its industrial protection demands. According to the European climate law, the EU must achieve a 55% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 and completely ban the sale of internal combustion engine vehicles by 2035, with EVs being the core means to achieve this goal. However, the price increase for EVs caused by tariffs will directly slow down the pace of EV adoption. Hungarian officials estimate that if the growth rate of EV sales declines, the EU's 2030 emission reduction targets may not be met. More ironically, the shortcomings of Europe's domestic EV industry cannot be compensated for by tariffs alone. European automakers' transition to electric vehicles has been generally slow. Volkswagen Group's €20,000 entry-level EV, the ID.1, has been postponed until 2027, while BYD's Seagull model is already priced close to this range in Europe. The European Automobile Manufacturers Association, ACA, admitted that Europe relies on Chinese patents for core areas such as battery technology and motor control, with 30% of critical battery technology originating from China. Trying to build cars behind closed doors with tariffs will only cause European automakers to lose opportunities for technical cooperation, further widening the gap with China. Trade protection cannot buy industrial security. The activation of the EU's tariffs on Chinese EVs is less of an industrial defense war and more of a strategic mistake that exposes its own vulnerabilities. In today's deeply integrated global EV industry chain, the walls built by tariffs will ultimately trap only the EU itself, hindering the green transition process, harming consumer interests, and triggering a chain of trade friction. For Chinese automakers, this struggle has accelerated the pace of localization, inadvertently becoming a catalyst for their global development.